Hello, everyone. This is Kerwin, and it's time for another episode of Travel Talk. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about what documents do you need to travel. Let's go. So, the document that you need to travel varies from time to time. If you're doing, if you're traveling within the United States, for example, or within your own country, you need some form of identification. The ID is usually a government issued ID, which would mean a driver's license or a passport or something that has your photo on there and your name. And then your travel documents, which is usually your airline ticket, should match the name that's on your document. So sometimes you have to have even the middle name. So if your ID has a middle name and your document doesn't have a middle name, sometimes this can be a problem. But usually if the first name matches, the last name matches, then you're good to go. If you're going international, which means out of your own country of origin, it's a little different. So you will need something like a passport. And the passport that you have must have at least 2 blank pages so that the officials can stamp your visa in the passport when you arrive. You may also need a visa. Some countries require that you apply for a visa before you leave your country, and you can do this online. In most instances nowadays, you can actually go online and do it. In other cases, you have to apply at what's called a consulate or an embassy. So you go, you look it up, and you figure out where is the consulate for the country that I'm going to. So for example, if you're going to somewhere like, and I had to go to Ghana a few years ago, and here in Houston, there was a consulate. I don't think there is anymore, but you go to this, and it was actually a house. And you go to the house, you have all the documents you filled out. You at the time you had to get present the passport picture, and you usually have to pay. And then the other thing is you needed a vaccination. In this case, I needed a malaria shot. And so I had to go to my doctor, and he administered the shot and gave me a little yellow card. And on the yellow card, it says when I got the shot and how long the shot is valid for. And then when I actually got to Ghana, I showed them that card. Interesting with Ghana at the time, I don't know if they still do it, is there is a nurse and she's right there waiting with a needle. And if you don't have your shot, actually it's not malaria, it's yellow fever. And if you don't have your shot, she would give it to you right there. And the weird thing with these shots is that it normally takes like 2 weeks to take effect. So when you're getting it on arrival, it's not necessarily going to help you, but you need it. Can't intubate without having that. So make sure you check those requirements. So it's a passport, the visa if you need it, and the some kind of health shot if you require. And the health shots are usually like yellow fever, malaria, and there are a few others. Now, how do you know what documents you need? If you're a US citizen, you can go to travel.state.gov. And when you go to that website, you search for the country that you're going to. And when you find that country, it'll have a list of all the entry requirements. And then it'll tell you if you require, whether it's a visa, how long can you stay on that visa? It's a visitor visa. Or some people going on business, you need to get a business visa. It tells you how long you can stay for that particular visa. Then it would link you off to a website for that particular country or consulate that will have more details and tell you what exactly you need to do. In addition, you could also go to the airline website, and the airline has a system. The backend system is called Thematic. And if you don't want to go to the airline's website, you can go to IATA Travel Center I think .org or .com is where you need to go. And it'll ask you information like when are you leaving? What's your country's citizenship? How are you getting there? So if you're connecting to another country, which is extremely important, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And it asks you some more personal information, like your passport information and things like that. Then it takes that information, it goes into a database, and it comes back and it tells you what documentation you need to enter that particular country. You cannot bypass this. If it says you need a visa, you need a visa unless you have some kind of special circumstance. And so for the visa itself, you can go to the website for that particular country, and then you can figure out, you can apply for them online. Most of them you can apply for online. Some countries allow you to do visa on arrival, which means that when you arrive in the country, you go to a special line and it'll tell you, if you have a visa, you need to go here. If you don't have a visa, then you go here. And the visa on arrival, it means that they're processing you when you get there. So they're asking you the questions: where are you staying? How long are you staying? Who are you staying with? And things like that. And you must answer those truthfully, because this is how they determine whether you can enter the country or not. There are a few countries where you can do what's called an authorization. So no visa is required to enter that particular country. One of these countries is Australia. So you don't need a visa to enter Australia, but what you need is an authorization to enter Australia, and then get your visa when you get there. So you go online, you fill this form out, and if everything is good, you get the visa. You pay like $20 for it, and you get the visa almost immediately. And it's just a confirmation that says you have your visa. There's no stamp or anything, and no, you don't have to print anything. But when you go to the airport and the agent swipe your passport, then the system says, oh, you have a visa and the visa is valid, or, oh, you don't have a visa, you need to get one. If you go into somewhere like the People's Republic of China, you have to go to physical embassy and you fill some forms out, stand in line for a little bit, and then you go for an interview, and then you get your visa, and it's a stamp in your passport, and you're good to go. Other countries, like if you go to South Africa, they physically have a stamp that they place inside your passport. Japan has something very similar. It's a stamp that they place inside your passport, and you do that on arrival. It is different for everyone who has a passport, and for every country, I meant to say. So if you're a US citizen or if you're a Canadian citizen, the requirements are different. For example, if you go to, say, Santiago, Chile, as a US citizen, you get a visa on arrival, and I think it's like maybe $10 or something like that. But as a non-US citizen, that's not a requirement. These requirements are done at a government level. So the ambassadors and all those people, they decide what the requirements are going to be. Visas are annoying, and they're annoying in the sense that they serve as a hindrance for visitors to the countries. So what the UNWTO, which is the United Nations World Trade Organization, I think it means, is they're trying to tell these countries, like, a visa is a hindrance, and when you have a visa, it's going to stop you from coming to your country, and it just stops commerce and trade and people seeing other people and things like that. So they're working and doing that. So what you see in a lot of countries doing is they're either doing online visas, or the price of visas is going down, or they're just not having any visa requirement at all. So you just come to the country, you show your passport, and then you're in. The idea behind visas is that if you don't live in a particular country, then you can't work there because you don't have the legal right to work. You can only visit. And so when you're coming to visit, they need to make sure that you're a good person, in essence. And so this is why they have these systems in place. Visas are interesting because if you're going by land, it's a different process than if you're going by air, and it's an even different process if you're going on a cruise ship. But typically, you need a passport. That's probably the basis that you need. Now, I was talking about connections, why it's important to put your connections in. Some country that, like, for example, if I go to Bogota from the US, I don't require any, I don't require a visa, and I don't require any health certificates or anything like that. But if I go to Bogota, if I go to US to say South America, i.e. Brazil, and then I go from Brazil to Bogota, I need a health document. I think it's actually a malaria shot is what I need. And it's only because I transited Brazil. So this is why it's very important when you're going from country to country to document, let the know what the rules are of the country you're transiting, so that doesn't cause issues for you. Also, when you go to other countries, like if you go to Jamaica, they make you fill out this long list of where have you been the last 3 months, I think it is. And depending on where you've been the last 3 months, you have to be in quarantine or you have to report back to them. Now, all this visa stuff became very top of mind when the whole world went through COVID a few years ago, and people had no idea that you even needed things like that. And so during COVID, you had a lot of requirements, like you had to have a COVID vaccination before you went. And if you didn't have the vaccination, you couldn't enter the country. Everyone thinks that vaccinations are new, but they're not. Because I just mentioned that you need vaccinations and you need health certificates and stuff like that to enter different countries. People just see it more now because COVID was a thing that affected worldwide. And so more people understand that. Ignorance of what the country documents are for travel is no excuse. You don't have the visa, you cannot enter. You don't have the malaria shot and you need one, you cannot enter. You don't have a passport with enough pages, you cannot enter. They will send you back. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts. These countries are very strict, and the United States is no different. They're very strict as well. And some places you have to go and apply for the visa and do an appointment, and then once you get the appointment, you go and you do the visa, and then you don't necessarily always get the visa. Some countries, if you're going from one country to the next, you don't need a visa from, let's say you're going country A, B, and C. You don't need a visa once you get to country B, you don't need a visa for country C. But if you're going directly from country A to country C without stopping in country B, you need a visa. So these things do happen. Remember, check the airline's website to figure out what document. The airlines are very good now. They were a little lax about it because it used to be at the airport level that you would know this. But when COVID started, they went through a really good process because they were the buffer zone. And they're the ones that were going to get fined. And so they created on their website, you could basically put in, and they had this before, but people just never cared about it. And lots of people get denied every day for not having the right visa. One of the places that people get denied for not having a visa is pretty much Australia, because they don't think they need one, but they do. And the other thing is that if you go to Brazil is going to start requiring a visa. I think it's October 1, if I'm not mistaken. But it is coming up that Brazil requires a visa. So the thing with Brazil is, first they required a visa, then they stopped, and now they're requiring a visa again. So make sure you check, because your trip will be ruined if you don't have the correct documentation to enter a country. Also, make sure you do not overstay your visa. So if you are allowed 6 months in a particular country and they stamp you 4 months, you can only stay 4 months. Now, you can apply for an extension, and they have procedures that you can apply for an extension, but do not overstay your visa, because the next time you come in, you will not get in, because the system keeps track of everything. Keep your passports, make sure that you have them with you. Some countries actually require you to keep your passport with you when you travel. So make sure you check that. They may ask you, well, where's your passport or something like that. It doesn't happen as much these days, but it used to before. But some countries, the rules are very different in a lot of countries, and you're not knowing the rule is not an excuse. There's also something called Schengen countries, and I think there's like 20 something Schengen countries. And these are a group of countries in Europe where they have, I'm actually going to look this up and read it for you because it's easier if I do that than try to get it from memory because I know I'm going to mess it up. Okay, so I have found the information and I'm going to make sure I read it because this is actually a critical part of it. Thing with the Schengen countries is that once you enter a Schengen country, you get a stamp, and then you can easily transit all the other countries in the Schengen zone for the 90 days, and then you have to leave. Otherwise, you violated your Schengen visa. And so, for example, one of the countries is Germany. So if I go into Germany, I get stamped into Germany, I'm good for 90 days. And I can go to the rest of the countries like Austria without showing my passport or showing any visa because I've already entered a Schengen country. Now, if I leave the Schengen zone, so let's say I go to the United Kingdom, I need documentation to get into the United Kingdom. So now I have to show my passport. And now whenever I'm leaving the Schengen zone, they actually look at your passport and they stamp you out. So now you have a stamp in and a stamp out. And this is why you have to make sure you do the 90 days. So the Schengen countries are, and I'm just reading this for you, Germany, Austria, Belgium, Croatia, Czech Republics, which I think is now called Czechia, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Italy, Latvia, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, the Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, and Switzerland are all Schengen area countries. And says holders of Schengen visa, which is valid to Schengen states, in the language in the issuing country may spend up to 90 days in a given 180-day period in the Schengen area, provided their visa is valid at the time. So you need to make sure that you've once you enter, which is why it's very important that when you enter, so if you go to France, they stamp you into France. So you can go to France, you can go to all those countries I mentioned, and you can exit, say, Sweden. And then when you exit Sweden, you will need documentation that you've exited Sweden, which is usually your passport. And what they will do, they will go and find the stamp that you entered in France and then stamp right below it that you exited. And so that's what they're doing when they're looking through your passport and doing all the things. Now, there is a whole lot of things that happen in the back end that you and I don't think about. And so it's quite interesting. I was coming through, I forgot where it was. And you see those glass they have, they look like mirrors by immigration. And it's the girl, she was fixing her hair and stuff like that. And I was like, you realize someone's behind that mirror. She goes, oh my God. And so lots of things happen in the back end that we don't think about. And the whole idea behind it is to keep us safe when we travel. This is why they need all these kinds of documentation. I know it's annoying. I know it's tedious. I get it. I understand. But it is necessary. So I hope this is helpful. And remember, whenever you need documentation, check the airline website. They will usually give you pretty good information because if they don't, they're the ones that's going to be responsible if they messed it up. So this is Kerwin with PassRider.com, Cruisinaltitude.com. Have a great trip and make sure you have the right documentation. Talk to you soon.